today's episode, we are going to talk about the time I threw a conference as a giant FU to Charlotte in the most Christian way ever.
How do Christian women say F you? You throw a conference in your face.
With a smile on our face and a Bible in our hand.
It's that old adage where they're like, if you want change, then you have to be the one to do it. Or, oh, you didn't like how that went, then do it yourself. You know? And you're like, fine, I will. And I'll do it better. Faith can feel like hearts and butterflies until someone lights a match and burns it all to the ground. Welcome to the Burning Butterflies podcast.
The sad thing is that there's abuse of every kind within the church. But the spiritual abuse is the stuff that just
What's a place there shouldn't be abuse? Like, there just shouldn't be abuse in a place that claims Jesus.
Well, it ruins your soul. If you're new here, we suggest listening to our prologue episode first. This is the story of two women's journey through toxic church culture and spiritual abuse, all while finding healing in the end.
Sometimes it's just the facts, and if you get offended by it, that's a you issue. And if we can't be mature enough to have these conversations, even if some of the topics are difficult, then shame on us.
We had been doing women's retreat for what felt like forever, and it was getting old and it was getting tired. We did the same thing over and over and over again. And it just, like, women weren't into it, you know? Like, it was losing momentum. At our peak, we had, like 120 women come into conference or come into retreat. I mean, by the time I was at my last one, there was like 60 women there.
Yeah, and I remember, I mean, like, it would fluctuate. Yeah, like 80, 60, 85.
Yeah.
I would say, like, the 100 and over 100 were like, those are the good old days. And then, like, floating just under 100 and yeah.
And so we kind of start doing this, you know, we do women's breakfast, we call it Joy in the Journey, and we talk about all of this stuff. And so it's almost like we have this little mini one-day conferences. Well, even that becomes overtaken. We have to have a craft. We have to have a table decoration. We have to have a keepsake for a freaking breakfast.
Yeah, it was like trying to make, like, it's so funny because, like, we've talked about it before. You talk about, like, the men's breakfast. They eat breakfast, they talk, somebody shares testimony, they go home, right? Like, but women's breakfast has to be this ordeal. Like, we can't just get together, eat some breakfast, have a little chit chat. Maybe somebody shares a testimony, we go home. No, we have to have speakers and like you said, centerpieces and themes.
Yeah.
And
keepsakes and it
like,
just got so overwhelming. And keep in mind, it's like the same 4 women who are doing this over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So as we're planning for women's stuff, if you haven't already listened to our chapter 5 trailer, I encourage you to go back and listen to that. It's a little short, 13-minute episode. But we kind of bring up these other conferences and stuff a little bit. But really, I went to a conference that was put on by some friends of mine in another town here in Colorado. And then you and Brandi attended another women's conference that was more like it kind of toured around the country. And Brandi and I really were like, we could do this ourselves, right? And so this kind of started off like right before we were put on timeout. And so then as we're we're still on timeout at this point. But when we bring it up to Charlotte, she's like, "Oh, just hold on to that. Just hold on to it because, every like November or December, we're going to have our big meeting and we are going to, talk about what we want to do the next year for our women's ministry." Basically, she had a meeting because she didn't know what she was going to present at the membership banquet. So she needed to have time to kind of pull some stuff together, right? So I go to that meeting and I'm like, "Hey, I think we could do our own conference. I really think we can do this. And it's going to be simple. You don't need worship. You don't need decorations. You don't need keepsakes. Like, if you're going to give things out, it needs to be things that are practical. You give the women a notebook and a pen and, maybe a granola bar to munch on, some candy. Like, you keep it very simple. Because remember, everything we do has to be free. So you could do it very cheaply, honestly, and we could do it ourselves. It doesn't have to be a multi-day conference because we found out when we tried to do the marriage conference, it's really hard to get people to want to come back that next day. It's hard to fill 2 days of content, right? If you're not stuck up on a mountain somewhere in the middle of nowhere and people are stuck there having to come to the next session. And so it was like, we could just do a 1-day conference. It'll be so great for these women who, they can't afford to go to women's retreat. They can't leave for a whole weekend. This will be great. And we'll do it, in January. And it's going to be good. And it was kind of one of those, like you said, like, well, if you have the vision, then God's going to tell you to do it. And so I got zero help from the collective women's ministry. It was very much like, well, build your team. And if God showed you this, God's going to provide a way for you to finance it also. And so everything we did, all of it, I funded pretty much by myself. I had a few other people that helped, that saw the vision and wanted to help donate to it. But really, it was me. And so I asked a couple women from our church to share their testimony. I did kind of the main, the big introductory session. The women who shared their testimony kind of lined up with my talk. And then we went to lunch. And then after lunch, I invited the women from Sterling, from that church conference that I had gone to come and share the same talk they had done at their conference, to come and share at ours. And they tweaked it a little bit just to so our theme was go, based off of the Great Commission, go into all nations. And it was this idea that it's really easy to say that you're a Christian, and it's really easy to say that you're going to follow Jesus. But how many of you are going to get off your ass and actually do something? How many of you are going to put that into action? When he says, care for the poor, how are you going to actually do that? When he says, come alongside those who are hurting and all of these kinds of things, what are you going to actually do with that? Right? So that was our conference. And it was simple. I took my couch from my house and my coffee table and some little bit of decorations, and set up the stage. When DJ and Steve got married, they had made these really pretty stained glass kind of panel things to put behind them on the stage as a backdrop. So I used their stained glass panels and we put those up, and it was very simple. And we decided that we were going to, because typically at Come As You Are, to invite women to come to a conference, it was just our own people, right? And then you get like an old, 1992 style printed clip art type invitation that you're supposed to hand out to ladies and invite them to come. I put together a press kit. I put together like bios and headshots of all of the speakers. And, like think of like if you were to get like a press kit for a conference that you're gonna, you get that in the mail as a church, or even if you see something on social media, a press kit for a conference, like I put together all of it. I made them slides that they could show at their church. I made them social media images ready to go and put it all together. And we mailed out press kits to churches. I was like, we want to invite you to come. Bring your women. It's free for lunch. Here's a list of local restaurants, or you're welcome to bring your own food, and just eat, bring your own lunch and eat in our facility. And, this is what we're going to do. And I think Charlotte thought that it was going to be kind of a flop and we might get like 30 women to sign up. We had almost 200 ladies sign up for this conference. And so then the more people who started signing up for it, the more she was like, oh. So then she had to get involved because now it's big, right? So then we had to
God finally showed her.
Oh, yes.
That's the vision all along.
So then we had to do stupid things like, we had to have someone sit at a table and check people in. Like what good did that do? Just, did you pre-sign up? Just check if their name's on it. If not, like we made a bunch of extra, like, because we had like a little swag bag and it just had like a little notebook, a pen, a bookmark, some candy, a Jolly Rancher, like a little bottle of water. Like, I mean, just stuff that you would use, right? I think we put chapstick in there and it was like just little baggies. And so we made a ton extra. And so I'm like, we don't even need that. Just have them like, just grab a bag and go sit down. Right. And we had probably like 30 ladies from our church that were like into it at this point and invested and like helped make the bags. And, we're all excited about it. And they were all like, yeah, like I won't take a bag till I know everyone else gets a bag. Right. So I was like, yeah, we're going to have plenty. But no, we had to check people in. And so Charlotte's like, we have to have that. And we have to have breakout sessions for women to have discussions like we do at women's retreat, right? So you have to have breakout sessions. I'm like, whatever. Like, if you want to do that, you need to figure it out.
Right. I'm not, that's so funny. Like, that's how I was with that Christmas play where I'm like, sure, you want to do it. Like, it is not going into my scope. It's not my plate.
Well,
but how funny. Like, we got to have breakouts. No, we don't. But we do. Okay.
Yeah, we do. And she was very adamant that she was going to randomly assign women to breakout sessions. So on the bottom of their bag, we wrote numbers. And so whatever number you got on the bottom of your bag, that's your breakout session that you went to. Okay. Like, but I mean, you have to realize we have 200 women. There's some women who are going to be like, I'm going with my friend because they're literally the only person here I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're going to make me have a conversation with strangers, I'm at least going to go with my friend.
Yeah.
And so she made a big deal out of that. She was like, and then we have to have facilitators. Her favorite F word, facilitator. And, so she picked who was going to be these facilitators and who was going to, lead these discussion groups.
Yeah.
Right. The discussion groups, I didn't go to one. Me and the ladies from Sterling actually sat in the sanctuary and ate cupcakes and just chatted with each other during the breakout. I talked her into, she wanted to have one after every session. And so I told her she got one. So we would do the big main talk, and I would speak, and then the ladies from our church would share their testimonies. Then we would have a breakout session, then we would do lunch, and then after lunch the Sterling ladies would talk.
Yeah.
And she wanted to
And
do
that
another
gave
one
the
at the
ladies
end.
who wanted to sneak out early for lunch an opportunity to do so.
Exactly. And she wanted to do one at the end of the day, and I said, well, first of all, women at the end of the day are going to be tired. It's a full day. We're throwing a lot of information at them. But also, like, it's January. They're going to want to get home before it gets dark. Like, I was really trying to get the Sterling ladies on the road,
Yeah.
at a decent hour because, they were a few hours away.
Yeah.
I talked her into just one. So she handpicked her facilitators. And shocking, it's the same women who she picks to be facilitators at women's retreat every year. And then she was like, well, we need someone to do like check-in at the check-in table. And I said, well, I got no one, so you need to find someone. And I did that because I knew, without a doubt, she was going to make Brandi do it. And Brandi, being my friend that wasn't supposed to be my friend. We weren't supposed to be friends at this time, but we are. If Brandi and I were allowed to be friends, this is what Brandi would have done for the conference anyway, because it's a job that is semi-important, but also like if she gets distracted, it's not the end of the universe. And so I knew without a doubt she would make Brandi do it, and she did. So Brandi got to help me even though she was told she wasn't allowed to, just like I helped with the play even though I wasn't allowed to. We still did this. So this was my like anti-retreat. Everything I hated about retreat, we're not doing. I don't want to stand and cry and sway and have worship, so we're just not going to have worship. I put together a playlist of the songs, the Christian songs that I liked. And so we had like ambient music, like as you were coming like in and out, finding your seats and stuff like that. I had that, but it was like Christian rock and Christian rap. We weren't playing like, our God is an awesome God and stuff like that. So Charlotte didn't like my music. She wanted to move all of the chairs in the sanctuary and set up tables. I was like, nope. I know we have room for 200 to do that, but we don't need that. We're going to they can sit in the rows. It'll be fine. They're fine. None of our talks, the longest someone was going to sit would be an hour. Hell, they do that with Tom on a Sunday morning. His sermons are like an hour and a half long. So they're only sitting for like an hour at a time. We had bathroom breaks built in and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm like, we're fine. They can sit in rows. And if, they need to get up, they need to go stand in the back, they need to walk around. If they want to sit at a table, we'll turn the TV on in the lobby and they can go sit out in the lobby and watch it like all the men do on a Sunday morning. Right? So that was our big solution. I thought the conference went well. There was a few, hiccups, but for really honestly, like I was kind of just like left to my own devices and was like, well, do whatever you want, but no, we're not giving you any support and we're not paying for anything. And so I kind of just made it happen myself. And I was surprised that we got as many women as we did.
You know what's funny about that is because it was like always known as Amanda's Go Conference.
Yeah.
Like it was not like nobody referred to it as like the church's conference or the women's ministry conference or when the women did this. It was always, do you remember when Amanda did go?
Yeah.
Legit.
But I think Charlotte kind of shot herself in the foot and did that to herself.
Yeah.
Because it was, you do it. You got to do it. You figure it out yourself. So I was shocked we got as many ladies as we did. We got a ton of ladies from other churches that came. But really, one of the only hiccups that we had was, if you listen to last week's episode, we talked about how Beth Moore had left the church. She was in charge of the sound booth, and so she did all the scheduling and everything. So this kind of left us a little high and dry. I had a woman who was going to run slides and stuff, but I didn't have anyone who was going to do sound. I was kind of banking on the fact that Beth Moore was going to do sound for me. And so when she left, I was kind of like, well, crap. Who's going to do sound for me? Any guesses on who stepped in and saved the day? It was Froggy. Froggy stepped in and saved the day.
Like the least likely of, I mean, not really, because if you, when you hear like how much of like the lackey for Tom and Charlotte that Froggy was, like, if there's nobody, we get Froggy to do it.
Which, honestly, I don't think he did it for them, because I think Charlotte would have loved it if I would have not had a sound person.
No, and if I remember correctly, Tom got involved, and because like messages went out like to the worship team and stuff. And I don't think anybody else was involved, but I don't think that like Charlotte was like asking Froggy. I think Tom got involved and asked the worship team, and that's how Froggy ended up doing it.
And I think Brandi asked Froggy to please, please, please. I know it's a women's conference, but please.
Possibly.
But I do know that Froggy liked my music. And Froggy liked the messages that he heard.
Yeah.
At the conference.
Yeah, because it wasn't like, that is like a testimony too. This was not a women's retreat.
Yeah.
And I don't think because you have to understand the people that did sound who were qualified were all men, except for Beth Moore and myself. But I didn't go to the conference. I wasn't available. And so I don't think any of them wanted to spend their afternoon. And sure as heck, Tom did not want to spend his afternoon at a women's conference, his day at a women's conference. And I think that's probably how Froggy got roped in. Like, it would have landed on Tom's shoulders to do it.
Well, and Tom's excuse was he couldn't.
Yeah.
We had to find someone. Tom couldn't.
Yeah.
Because we were, like, when you invite someone to come and speak at your event, there's typically, you pay for their travel expenses, right?
Yeah.
And so I offered the ladies, I would either buy their gas or I would feed them lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And so I ordered like cupcakes and like sub sandwiches and stuff, and that's what we had for lunch with the ladies from Sterling. And then we were going to cater in dinner. And so this is the only thing that Charlotte intervened on. And we took up a collection between all of the women who were involved in like setting up and planning and all of that for the conference. We took up a collection amongst each other, and I think everyone had to like pay in like $20 or something, but there was a lot of us who were a part of this. I mean, because I think we had like 10 facilitators, and then, you know, all the speakers. And I mean, I bet there was probably 20 of us by the time you added everyone up. And so everyone pitched in something like $20. And we catered in Olive Garden. And Charlotte was very excited about this because I don't think Tom likes Olive Garden.
Probably not.
Uh, and
Not when your mother was Italian. I'm sorry, you don't like
yeah,
Olive Garden.
but Charlotte does.
Yeah.
And so this was her opportunity to have Olive Garden catered in. Um, and so Tom couldn't do the sound because Tom was gonna go pick up the Olive Garden and bring it to the church for us so we could all have dinner after the conference, all of the speakers and the planning team.
Yeah.
And
Because that sounds more
I
like
ju
something he would do voluntarily, not do sound for a women's conference.
Oh, exactly. I'm sure it was like, "Do you wanna drive and go pick up dinner, or do you wanna sit there all day long?"
No,
And
that
he's like,
yeah,
"I'll
that
do."
was his out, so he didn't have
Yeah.
to do that. That's funny.
Froggy was very helpful,
Yeah.
and I remember at this time just being like, "Man, he was good." Like, I gave him a cue sheet, of like, "This is what we're doing," and man, I didn't have to worry about nothing. He was on it. Like, and so, like, what was going on, like, in your home? Like, I mean, you guys are coming off of the play.
Yeah, well, and you know what's so funny though is because, like, I kid you not, if you asked him, okay, like this is like the strangest thing about how this man operates, right? Like, if somebody else had done it and it sucked, he would have an opinion about how he would have done it and it would have been perfect, right? Like after the fact. Well, you should have just asked me. I could have, don't you know how to like listen and watch for the cue? Like he would have had all kinds of opinions about how that person sucked and he would have done it so much better. But if you asked him like a month ago, I don't know how to do sound. I can't do that. You're going to want somebody else to do it. Like I can't do that. Right. But because it happened, not necessarily last minute, but in a last minute way with Beth Moore leaving and then them trying to find somebody. And then
It was
Froggy,
very last minute because, I mean, Beth Moore left, like, middle to end of January, and I mean, this conference was January 20th.
yeah. So I mean, like, it
So, I mean,
wasn't
it
like
was
the day before. There was enough time to ask people and find people, but like it was like a last minute way of like he stepped in to save the day and then he does it just fine.
yeah.
And you're like, wow, that was really good. Wow, this guy could actually do something. This is something that has boggled my mind as long as I knew this man. Like, it would be the same with all of his jobs. He would go to work and do like construction stuff with these guys, like home remodels and stuff, and do a really good job. But if you asked him, he doesn't know how to do any of it. And if somebody does it wrong, he could have done it better. Like, I don't understand. So, I mean, that's just an example of something I've tried to express on this podcast before. It's like, that is actually an example of something that boggles my mind. But yeah, we are coming down off the play and we're looking towards like doing another, trying to figure out how or what we can do next, right? Like at this point, we probably already decided to we ended up doing a Valentine's Day play, which I know we're talk about, but so we're probably at this point, this is the end of January, already working on that. Um, and things are, I didn't go to the conference. I wasn't involved in any way because I worked, you know, a full-time plus job. Um, and I feel like there wasn't anything like dramatic or drastic going on, just the same old crap, just a different day, right? Um, but I do
Is he, like,
know,
still being, like, explosive violent at this point, or is that
always like
kind
he
of
was
like
never not
yeah?
explosive violent. There is no not explosive violent. But the thing with Froggy is he would check out and like disassociate and then check back in randomly. And you just never knew what it was going to be that he was going to, like you could do something
Yeah.
10 times and he wouldn't say anything. And then you do it the 11th time and it's the end of the world. It's like World War III. And you're like, okay, so then you never knew. It was a
Yeah.
totally random, chaotic, whenever, whatever, right? So, I mean, that was all still going on. Like, I feel like at some point I'm like, yeah, like the things I've said that were happening during any specific season, those things were always happening.
Yeah.
But how frequently and to what degree is what changed. The behaviors never changed. The behavior was always the same. And I think that just comes down to when you deal with abusers is they will do whatever it is that they need to do to get you to conform. So eventually there's seasons of, wow, they're not as violent. Why? Because you learned to sit down and shut up. You learn to just say yes. You've learned to agree with them, even if you don't. Like you learn how to behave so that they don't misbehave.
Yeah.
So, I
Do you
mean,
do you feel like because we, like, came off the play and then you guys are planning on which we're gonna talk about in next week's episode, um, the Valentine's dinner, and now he's getting praises of, like because, I mean, so many people were like, "Thank you so much for doing sound for this," like and I made sure to, like, do a shout out from stage, "Hey, can everyone turn around and just thank Froggy? He didn't have to be here, but he's here, and can everyone just thank Froggy?" Like, do you think because he is getting a lot of praise
yeah.
and validation from other people that
Oh, yeah. This is definitely the season of, um, yeah, he's starting to get that acknowledgement. Um, and rightfully so, like, but also not rightfully so, 'cause you you acted in a play, that's great, but you're taking credit for directing, like, the entire play, right? Like,
yeah,
and, like, come on. But, but I'm also feeding into it too because that's like that was the goal, that was the dream, and so, like, I'm willing to do whatever work I need to do and carry the majority of the weight in these things because, he's in my mind, like, he's further behind and I'm helping support him so that he can catch up and then exceed, excel past. If that
yeah,
if that makes sense, like, so I that's how I'm viewing all of this at this point. Well, you haven't done any of these things, and I guess some of it comes more naturally to me. So I'm giving him a lot of space to do what he needs to do, and then I'm willing to do a lot of the grunt work for him and let him take the credit because he needs that to gain his confidence so that he can take over the reins. Um, but it's really interesting because I think the most interesting thing that happened at this point was because when Brandi got sent to us at the play, her, Jason, Froggy, and I all really clicked. And this is really where, like, I knew who Brandi was and I talked to her a lot up until the play, but like I wouldn't have said we were friends. Like she was a lady I
yeah,
went to church with. And I liked her. Well, I liked her and she liked me, and we would, when we found ourselves in the same circles, we had a great time, but it wasn't like we were planning anything outside of church events and being friends. So, but the play changed that to where we started to build a friendship. And then, but I think by the Go conference, and I feel like this event was a turning point for Brandy's relationship with Froggy.
yeah,
Because we haven't talked about because that's where we're at in the timeline now, is where Brandi and Froggy develop a friendship as well.
yeah. Well, and Brandy's not one she doesn't like sitting in a chair for long periods of time. She, she I mean, fact that like, the fact that we didn't know she had ADHD, I kinda look back and I'm like, "Well, duh,"
Well, I knew she had ADHD. The fact that
but
she didn't know, this is where the fact that she didn't know,
yes.
I was like, girl, please.
Yeah. So, I knew she wasn't gonna sit and listen to the whole conference. I knew she would get up and wander around, she'd find something to do. I knew we didn't have to worry about checking and making sure the bathroom was stocked and all of that kind of stuff, because she was gonna squirrel out and, like, get distracted with something in the middle of a session and go check all that stuff, right? So she went up and sat quite a bit in the sound booth with Froggy and sat up there and just talked with him. And so, yeah, that kind of like built their friendship. But then also, like, this is kind of where, like, Brandi started, like, man, Froggy did so great at this. Froggy did so great at that. Like, going to Tom and Charlotte and, like, talking Froggy up
Yeah.
to his parent, which, how sad is that?
Right. But I
Like,
know she mentioned it before where, like, she really felt like they were both, like, misunderstood and not validated and, like, always given the short end of the stick, and so she really did start championing for him at this point.
yeah, yeah. But just, like, as his parents, like,
Right.
you have other people compelled to come to you and tell you that your son is doing a good job because you
Because
refuse
you
to
refuse to
acknowledge
acknowledge
it.
it. Yeah, exactly. I know. How sad. But yeah. But she really did.
But
She really started, like,
I
and
guess
then she would
also at
tell
this
me, like, "Oh, I told Charlotte this. I told Tom this." And she would start telling me things, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I'm so glad." And my response at the time, I was so glad. Like, somebody else is seeing what I see,
yeah,
and somebody else is an outside opinion. And yeah, let's, build him up, build him up, build him up.
yeah. Which I know for some of our listeners, that probably sounds a little weird that, like, you're wanting to build up a man that's actively abusing you. But
Well, because then the abuse would stop, right?
yeah,
If he was actually living out if he was actually happy with who he was, and there's a lot of the success traits that you think of the people who have them, you assume that those people are actually mentally stable, emotionally regulated, and healthy, happy adults. And so those people who are successful like that are not the people that are abusing people. Like, that's what you think.
well, and then you also have, like, the Christian narrative of it all of, like, well, yeah, he just needs to, like, surrender to God, and, we all have sin that we struggle with, and so if you get him all in and all on board of stuff in the church, he's gonna be so overcome with the Spirit
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
will not feel the need to abuse his family anymore.
Right. Yeah. But that'd be great. Oh, yeah, it is.
So
It's a bunch of but it is. It's all what you think because you don't realize that all the people whose husbands look like they're doing all that are actually beating the shit out of them too. So,
yeah. But we're gonna kinda continue this idea over on our Patreon. Um, we're gonna talk about how women's conferences why are women's conferences the way they are compared to men's conferences? But also, like, it is kinda weird that Froggy was the only man there at the Go
Yeah.
conference. Um, so we're gonna talk about a time where Tom actually kinda crashes a women's conference and goes to one. So, join us over on our Patreon for that. But to finish out this episode, I kinda wanted to talk about what came out of the Go conference. So, you had mentioned, like, it was forever known as the conference that Amanda did, right? But I also know, and I, like, this is the parts of, like, the podcast where I really struggle with my old Christian self of, like, not self-inflating myself and not being like, "No, I did that and I freaking killed it and I was awesome at it." Um, because that's really hard for me to say those things. but I did.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. That's why it
Yeah.
was forever known as Amanda's Go Conference.
Well, and then every time someone wanted to do something, it was like, "Well, you have to have keepsakes." Well, Amanda didn't have them at Go, and it went great.
Yeah.
And, you have to have this, you have to have that. So it
Well, and
kinda challenged that, like, status
it
quo a little
did,
bit.
and it did it for women. Like, I didn't go, so remember, I don't know, but I do know that it would come up at women's retreats planning after this, like,
Yeah.
and then it was like, because we did something else where when you were talking about the breakout group in the middle before
Yeah.
lunch, there's a women's retreat coming up, and it was done, and it was compared to your Go conference, like, bit for bit.
Yeah. So that came out of it. If you follow the real Come As You Are in real life, you will notice that a lot of their women's stuff, they do, women's No, Grow, and Go, um, events. They actually ripped that off from the ladies from Sterling because the ladies from Sterling came and there was 4 of them. So it was like no God, um, grow in your faith, share, so like share who God is to you with others, and then go out and actually do something about it. Like go use your gifts, use your talents, change the world, right? So they ripped that off. They didn't like the share part, but they kept the no, grow, and go.
Yeah.
And it like on their little logos, and they'll try to do little conferences every so often. And they use their little no, grow, and go logo. Um, just know they ripped that off from
Well, you know what I think
the
is
ladies
funny?
from Sterling.
Has nothing really to do with that, but you just mentioned if you follow Come As You Are in real life, IRL. Um, it does crack me up, though, that there was a fad for churches to put Come As You Are on their church sign. And it is no secret that the sign Come As You Are on churches, and specifically on Come As You Are, is why we named the church in this podcast Come As You Are. And we've talked about the fact that they do still put that sign up, and we think they do it in like an anti-psychological of no one will think it's us if we put the sign on our sign. But what I do find funny is that when you're driving by, the sign that says come as you are, the sign that says come as you are is bigger than the sign that says the name of the church. So I was like
I know, right?
the other day, I was like, it wasn't just that they have the sign. It was the fact that it's so big. And the sign of the name of the church is so small in comparison. So there you go. I thought that was funny.
That's hilarious.
But this
Really the
par
only
for the
other
course, though, everything is ripped
Oh,
off.
yeah. Yeah. Yep. Because even Come As You Are, they took it from other churches.
Yeah.
Tom doesn't write his own sermons, he bought them
Yeah.
from a kid,
Like, people need to understand, you were scrolling through TikTok one day, and there was a lady, and she showed her sermon notes, and you were like, "Oh, it's Come As You Are," and the lady turned out to be at a church in Tennessee. Like,
Yeah, but it's seriously same font, same
yeah,
like,
same
it's the
format,
same
same
sermon
font.
notes. Yeah.
Like, you sent it, you said, "Look at this TikTok," and I was like, "Oh, it's somebody from Come As You Are, this sermon note," and you're like, "No, look where the church is at," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're ripping off Tom."
They bought the kit
They
too!
bought the kit too. Yeah.
Yeah, but really the only other thing is, I think because Come As You Are Tom has had this vision that we're going to grow. We're going to double in size. It's going to be amazing, right? And so he just truly believes everything we are doing is going to bring in so many people. And so we have to have this little card because even though our church doesn't care about you whatsoever, we could not care less about you unless you're willing to give us something. But we aren't going to come out and say that, right? We need to do all the Christian, like, we want to pray for you. Even if we're not your home church, we want to pray for you, right? So it was essentially, we created like a little Go Conference communication card where we gathered all these people's information and, talked about, praying with them or whatever. But then, Charlotte wanted to add, like, if we were to do another conference like this, would you attend? I think she thought that most people were going to be like, I don't know or no. But because I was like, well, if we're going to hand this out, I'm going to make it, right? So it doesn't look stupid and janky. So I made it and I put like, no thanks, or it would depend if it worked into my schedule or something, or like, absolutely, yes, I loved it. And the amount of people who marked like, absolutely, yes, I loved it was like a large majority of the women, right? So we have these little communication cards. And at the end, I'm like, hey, if you want to pray, if you have any questions or anything like that, all of the speakers, we stood up and we kind of like sat on the edge of the stage at the end. And I think that was the one worship song we sang, was we played like a YouTube video of a worship song on the screen. And I was like, during the song, if you're not into singing, like, see you later. This is our last song. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and talk to us. Or if you filled out your card, you could bring it up and drop it in one of these baskets up here. Because Charlotte wanted to pass around like the offering bags. And I was like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. Yeah. They can come up here and they can drop it in a basket. And then we put one like on the table on the way out. So like, feel free to drop it back there too, if you want. And so I was sitting on the edge of the stage and a woman approached me and handed me her card. And she said, well, during your talk, you mentioned that you used to be involved in children's. I had shared this story from children's ministry. So she's like, you said you were a part of children's ministry. And I was like, yeah, I used to be a part of kids. And she's like, well, do you have like a lot of technology in your children's ministry? And I was like, well, I mean, like our worship, we play like YouTube videos for our worship. And occasionally like a teacher will have like a video with the curriculum if they want to show that. They don't have to, but like some teachers will utilize that sometimes. And she's like, well, we're like a very like no tech family. Like even all of this is too much. And she gestures to like the projection screen where like, you project like the words and like, I mean, every church in America has a projection screen now. Like she gestures to the screen on the wall. And I was like, okay. And she's like, well, thanks for inviting me to come. I got like, I found it on Facebook. And I was like, oh, great. Awesome. Thanks for coming. And she handed me her card and she walked away. And I was like, okay, well, that was kind of weird. But that really was kind of like, she was the only person who came up and was like wanted to talk, wanted to pray. And like, that was the purpose. That's what we wanted. We wanted people to feel like if you want to come up and you want to say something, like a lot of women came up and were like, thank you so much. This was great or whatever. Or like went up to the woman that like they liked their talk the best. It was like, thank you so much for sharing. I really enjoyed it, whatever. But it didn't have to be a whole big thing. We didn't have to do an altar call. We didn't have to do, pass the bag or anything like that. Like you could do it simply and it would be okay.
Burning Butterflies is a listener-supported podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing supporters on Patreon.
Follow the link in our show notes to learn how you can become a Patreon supporter too. Supporters get exclusive access to bonus content each month, including outtakes, cut content, and supporter-only episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your listening platform.
Burning Butterflies is a production of Asha Media. Thank you for listening.